Thank you everyone for joining us today. I know some of you, others I don't know. I'm Danny Beam. I'm delighted that you joined the party. I am the owner of Beam Consulting and I'm the host of this webinar today, but I'm going to very quickly turn it over to Beth. So Beth and I partner on a lot of projects. My company does strategic planning, fundraising, and communications, fundraising, and then marketing and communications. And so I often bring Beth in to help with that marketing and communications side of things because that's not my area of expertise. And I just in full disclosure, I'm a client of hers because it is not my area of expertise. So you are in excellent hands today. Beth is the co-owner of Headline Consultants. She has deep background in marketing and communications, content writing, social media management. So you're in good hands today. The only value I add to this conversation is that I'm helping to manage the room. So if you have questions and you don't feel like calling out, which you are absolutely welcome to do, you can put them in the chat and I'll be helping to monitor that for Beth. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to her.
Well, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending today and for Danny for that lovely introduction. So yeah, I'm Beth Michael-John. I am a co-owner of Headline Consultants. And I'm going to share my screen here so that we can get started. Okay. So get everything here all set up. So so as I said, I'm the co-owner of a content marketing agency. We specialize in content. And really at the end of the day, we just love telling the stories of organizations that we care deeply about. So with that said, I'm so excited to be talking about social media today because it really is a driver of those types of conversations for your community. There is so much that I could cover. It's actually really hard to pinpoint how to approach today's discussion. But I want to focus on kind of two common barriers that I hear a lot of organizations struggling with. Let me see here. Okay, are you all seeing the next slide? Yep, okay. So these two common barriers to social media management and success, most of the organizations I talk to, they say one of two things, if not both. They don't have time and they really don't know exactly what to post. And I'm sure I don't need to tell any of you that, a lot of times these barriers are magnified when you're a small, nimble nonprofit where many staff members are kind of wearing several hats. So my goal today is for you all to leave this group knowing how to make more time for your social media efforts and also know exactly really what to post when you kind of step out of here and go to engage your audiences. So these are our goals for today. So we're going to break up today's discussion too into three different areas. So we have to touch on strategy, community, and storytelling. It's really the core of your social campaigns. But I think where a lot of people get hung up is the execution. So I want to talk about the execution, the approach, and certainly your team, which very well may be a team of one for many of you. And then I want to close with some fundraising tips and some things that you can hopefully go right and put right into practice when you start a fundraising campaign in particular. So let's jump right in to part one with our big goals here. So a lot of animations on this slide. So, we're going to start again, where every marketing initiative should start. What are your big goals? I'm sure you've thought through this, you have them. They're probably slightly evolving, but really before you start down the road of what do I post and how do I make time for social media, you need to identify those big goals. And then certainly how can we help you or how can social media help you guys get there? So, when nonprofits are looking to reach their big goals, it really does almost in all cases come down to how are you educating a community, advocates, partners, and donors. And this is where social media really steps in and can be a huge tool for your organization. So, if you're new to social media now, or if you're active but not really engaging your community too well, we want to think through those that you serve, your donors, and your partners, and how can we create a social media campaign that can engage those 3 areas. So this is where you're going to look at how to engage your community. So before we can know what to post and, all of the questions I get, like how often should I post and what platform should I be on? We need to take a step back and say, how do you build and engage a community first? To do that, I like to start by answering 2 questions. So first, where is my community active online? We need to figure out where your audience is. And then what type of content do they want to consume? What's going to be meaningful to them? So we're going to talk through both. First is, where is my community? This is important, and I also think this is one of the harder questions for most organizations to answer. It does take a little bit of understanding of the different platforms that are available and who's on those. So I wanted to just quickly throw some stats at you. These are Hootsuite statistics. If you're looking for more, Hootsuite is a great resource where they have a lot of documentation that can help you dig deeper into some of these platforms. But I want to start, we're going to hit the 3 big ones that either I identify as important for nonprofits, and then some of you had questions as well about these platforms. So we're going to focus today's discussion on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. So Facebook, of all Facebook users, this is just, I want to look at where your audience is based on age range. I think that's an important place to start. Facebook users, most are in, as you can see here, that 18 to 44-year-old range. We look at Instagram, the audience shrinks in age a little bit. We're looking at 18 to 34. And then for all those of you thinking, should I be on TikTok? A good place to start is that that platform really does consume the 18 to 34-year-old as well. So essentially, the older you are, the less likely you are to be on TikTok. That's probably, pretty something we would expect. But TikTok is really one of those platforms where you want to know what you're getting into. So if you're really targeting that 18 to 34 year range, I absolutely encourage you to do a little bit more research on TikTok, and we'll get into that. But the older your audience is, I would say start with Facebook, the Instagram, and then move into TikTok later. So again, we're going to go over that a little bit later on. So, peer-to-peer campaigns, I do want to make sure that we're threading that throughout our discussion as well today. So as I said earlier, Facebook and Instagram, really social media in general, but particularly Facebook and Instagram, they are really meant for building community. And when you're talking about a P2P campaign, you are looking, these campaigns are major opportunities for cause-based nonprofits to both grow awareness and grow your donor pool. So Facebook and Instagram, again, are really set up for these. So if you are a cause-based nonprofit looking to, grow awareness and donor pool, and P2P something you've been considering, really hone in on Facebook and Instagram, not just today, but when you leave here today. Those are the platforms that you really want to be focused on when looking to engage your community a bit further.
Beth, I asked in the chat how many felt like they needed to use TikTok based on the age range. And there are some folks that think it would be really great. So Ellen Michael said it would be great to promote youth programs. Jenny said she thought it would be useful, but it feels super overwhelming. Sherry uses TikTok for secondhand store advertising. So it turns out that there are uses for that tool that I never use because I am also overwhelmed by it. Jenny, I feel your pain.
It is overwhelming. Just the platform itself can be overwhelming. I will say, and I think I talk about this later, TikTok is a great research tool. So when you're trying to find out where is your audience, you just by simply going into the search and searching hashtags and searching what would be your keywords for your organization and your industry, it will pull up other influencers that are creating similar content. You can get a sense of what's working and what isn't just based on those search results. And you can really weed out, platforms and influencers that aren't speaking to who would also be your audience. So I like TikTok for research, and I like Facebook and Instagram for the building of the community again, leveraging some of that research, because there's a lot of crossover with TikTok and Instagram where they can really inform one another as well. So, and I want to say too, so much of this is high level. We only have an hour and a half. I could talk about this all day, all week. So, if there are questions that you have that we aren't getting to, I'm certainly available after, and we could dig a little bit deeper into what your particular question is. So just so that's there. Okay, so once you've found your community online, it's time to create content that engages with them. And this is how you start to really understand exactly what content to post, which is one of the goals I want you to leave with here today. So there are two types of content that I focus on. The first is the content has to be meaningful. So that content has to be relevant to both your organization and your larger community. And meaningful content, by that, I mean, sharing content that shares your purpose, story, how you connect to your community. You're not just throwing content out there for the sake of it, but you're really kind of touching on why you exist, why your organization matters, and what value you're bringing. The second type of content, valuable content. And by that, I mean educational, informative, helpful. This is content that's not about you. This is how can you provide greater value to your community and engage them with your mission. So these two types of content, when they come together, again, going back to P2P, which I want to make sure we're all thinking about, P2P is driven by shareable content. So if your content's not meaningful and it's not valuable, it's certainly not going to be shareable. So when you're putting your content together, also always think in the back of your mind, why would someone share this piece of content? Why would a member of my community share it with a member of their community? And by, essentially grow your donor pool. So you have to be thinking about, content that is going to be so, incredibly interesting that it's going to be shared as well. And then when you're looking at your donor base, what kind of content's going to engage your donors? I like to ask the first question is why, answer the question for yourself. Why do your donors donate to you in the first place? What is it about your organization that just has made that connection, that they're pouring their dollars behind you? Then you want to create content that helps to answer that question, to do two things: remind your donors of why they're supporting you, and then make the argument to potential donors as to why they should also come into your world. So I know that's a lot to think about, but really at the end of the day, what I love to remind everyone of, and this is really like the golden rule when you're creating content, this is my favorite. One of my favorite quotes, obviously favorite content marketing quotes, is that content marketing is like a first date. If all you do is talk about yourself, there will not be a second. So engaging content is not about you at the end of the day. It's about those you serve. And if you keep this in mind, you will naturally be going down the path of finding meaning, valuable, shareable content for your community. Okay. So I think we're doing pretty good on time. That what I wanted to do is obviously touch on strategy, but we're really here today to talk about that execution. So I want to get everyone kind of broken up into groups. We're going to do a couple things now, and this is going to lead us into that execution discussion. So Danny's, I think, going to break you up into some groups. Start by sharing what are those big goals. It could be one, it could be, multiple. The answer could also be we're working through this right now, and that's fine. But you're going to discuss in your small group for about 10 minutes or so. Share, not only what those big goals are, but discuss, what type of content that you're focused on now that's helping to engage your community to help you reach those big goals, and whether it's working or not. So not just the type of content, but discuss what platforms you're testing, what you're using. Examples of the type of content could be testimonials, educational content, mission-focused content, whatever it may be. I would just love for you guys to hear from one another, and then come back and we can discuss some of the higher level findings.
And if this is the first time you're thinking about all of this, you might be able to use these questions as a guide to help develop your plan. So do you have a goal in the back of your mind that you could articulate? Or if you have the goal in mind, but you haven't started to think about how you could use social media to advance it, based on what you've heard so far today. Maybe map out some ideas that you would want to take back and try with your team after this is over. So I'm going to break you into groups, and we'll give you about 10 minutes to have a conversation. Then we'll come back together and do a debrief. So if you feel yourself swooping through the air, it's because we are making that happen. Okay. And let's go. Okay, we'll see you back here in a little bit. Welcome back.
We have everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wonderful. All right. So Danny, let me know you guys have had some really great discussions. It sounds like there were a lot of execution related questions. So I'm thinking, unless anyone has a burning desire to share something that their group was discussing, I'm thinking it makes sense to just get right back into the execution phase, start that discussion, and then go through, we'll leave time to go through all of your questions, some of which I think will be answered as we go through the rest of the presentation, if that's okay with anyone. But does anyone want to pose a question or a portion of the discussion that you all just had before we move on? No? Okay. All right, then we're going to keep moving along here. All right, so again, let's get part 2 going. So, I think this is where a lot of, get my animation set up here. This is really where I think, we can talk strategy all day, but at the end of the day, social success comes down to quality execution. And you need 3 things to really make the execution shine. You need a plan, you need the right tools, and you need the right team. So we're going to go through each one of these and really understand what it takes to, we're going to start with, put a very intentional social media plan together. There are several aspects of a quality plan, but the 2 I want to focus on today are your content pillars, and I'll explain what those are, as well as a content calendar and how to think about that in a way that's going to make your life so much easier and going to help you know not only exactly what to post, but when, and make sure that you have the right cadence so that you're speaking to your audience in a very intentional way. So I don't know, has anyone, if we can see all of your hands, has anyone worked with content pillars, or are we all pretty much kind of unfamiliar with what those are? Anyone? Okay. So content pillars are the categories of content that come together, work together to tell your story. So, this begins at the marketing strategy level, understanding your brand's messaging. Once we have that established, the question is, how do we translate that in a way that we break it down and deploy it across social? So this is an example of a client that I currently work with. They are a nonprofit retirement community. We actually help them put their marketing strategy together. And these 4 kind of main message points were turned into pillars for social. And just to give you an example here, you can hopefully see this: purposeful retirement, employee culture, community destination, and life plan community. These are really the 4 aspects of our marketing strategy that everything stems from. So, and not just social media, by the way. So when you're starting to think about, what types of content can I create that are meaningful, this is a great place to start. So if you have these 4 pillars, and again, this is going to be dependent on your organization. You may have 3, you may have 5. I never recommend having more than 5 because things just start to get a little too confusing. But the way to think of these pillars is you have your 4 main kind of categories, your 4 main messages. Now in each of the pillars, you can see kind of these sub messages and how we've broken them down. So we'll just go through one: purposeful retirement. How are we communicating that? We're highlighting ways that that this client allows residents to continue to live vibrant lives, sharing stories and showcasing seniors who are active in the community. So those are three different ways that three types of content you could look at it as that are reinforcing this broader message of purposeful retirement. And you would do that, you create those sub messages for each of your pillars. So together, these content pillars are going to drive your content strategy. And by that, I mean that, there's always the exception to the rule. But at the end of the day, every piece of social content that you are putting out should fall within one of these pillars. And then the question is, which pillars are the priorities? And you would, like, let's say purposeful retirement was our top priority pillar. Then we want to make sure, and this is an internal discussion, a strategic decision, maybe that means that every single week we're putting out at least one post that connects to that pillar to reinforce that message. There may be a different cadence you have. That's where you need to take the messaging strategy and kind of think about it in terms of priorities and what makes sense for your community.
Beth, I have one comment based on something in the group and then one question for you. So I heard someone say one of their priorities is to recruit youth. So would that be a content pillar example from this group on like a strategy to sort of attract and engage a youth audience?
Certainly. So actually, let's look at employee culture here, the second pillar. If employee culture was a larger, maybe main message, the goal of which is that within that culture, we want to bring in a more youthful employee base, then absolutely. So, like, let's say, how can we share stories of existing current employees who are younger and show them really emotionally connected to the cause, let's say. So that story would kind of drive home why someone who's a little bit younger would enjoy working there, connecting to that mission. And then maybe the call to action in those social posts is to learn more about joining the organization. So absolutely. And there's lots of different ways. It's so much easier for me to look at your broader strategy and see how that fits in. But just at first glance, to answer the question, absolutely, that could be a priority. And then social posts would be able to support that.
Great. And then the follow-up question to all of this is, I know that there are several organizations that are with us today that are really small or just getting started. And so they might not even have begun thinking about their brand and how to articulate the brand. I mean, I know it took me 10 years to actually do that work. So do you have any advice on either really small organizations or organizations that are just getting started on how they might organize their thoughts to come up with some workable content pillars until they do deeper work on brand and all that kind of stuff?
I do. So I would say your purpose, the reason that your organization exists in the first place, is always where you start. You may have one content pillar to start with, and that's simply reinforcing what that purpose is, and that's fine. I think it's more about, no matter the number of pillars, that you're very intentional with what it is you're trying to say and how you're creating content that's engaging, that's communicating that message you want to create. I think another kind of maybe second place to start, most organizations, they have other organizations out in the world that do similar things to what they do. Think through how you're different. What are your differentiators? That's kind of a part of any marketing plan, but knowing what those differentiators are, you can then create social content to showcase that. Maybe that's a testimonial with someone from your community where they're sharing how the organization story connects to theirs, showing what the organization did for that community member. So yeah, I mean, I would much more rather you have one pillar where you know exactly what it is you're trying to say, then worry about, oh my gosh, I need to have 4 pillars, and what are those and how do they all work together? This is meant to be a guide and a bit of a roadmap, but really this all comes down to, what is it you're trying to say that's meaningful, that can connect to your audience, and just being very intentional about how you do that.
Thanks. Any other questions, group, before we move on? Okay, I'm gonna shut up now, Beth.
Okay. All right. So once you have, again, one pillar or five, whatever it is, now it's time to frame out that content strategy into a content calendar. This can be as simple or as complicated as you want to make it. What I just want to stress here is that this doesn't have to be anything more than an Excel spreadsheet with a bunch of tabs. And you are looking to say, okay, over the next 12 months, kind of here's what's going on and here's how I'm going to stay on top of my content. So again, I'm intentional about what is going out. This is an example of that same client that I mentioned. So the colors correspond to the colors that I showed you on the content pillars. I think one of the colors is a little off, but the idea here is that at a glance, I can say, okay, in June, I can see that I'm hitting my retirement pillar and my employee culture pillar. And, we've decided that recruitment is a really big priority this year. So I'm going to make sure that, I'm seeing green on this calendar every other month in this case. Maybe for you, it's every month. There's no right or wrong. It's just how does your content support your overall strategy. But what I like to do here too is start annually. This doesn't have to be complicated. Just look at your calendar and say, okay, I have, a fundraising event in October. Let's be smart about how we back into that. Let's reverse engineer that marketing plan and make sure that maybe in your case in July, we have an invitation going out. So how is that going to be communicated through social as well as your other channels? This should give you at broad glance confidence that what is going out when, and then you can start to drill down. It could be another tab into what does your content look like on a quarterly basis. So, that event, what are all the different types of elements of content that need to go out to get ahead of that event and make sure you're driving registrations, let's say. And then it breaks down a little bit further by month is where I kind of stop. And I'm actually plotting out the individual social posts. What do they need to say? What is the call to action? Where do I want people to go next? What is the graphic? Maybe it's a still image or a video. Kind of how does that all look? And now I can go ahead and we'll get to actually scheduling that content. So I think, if there's anything I hope you take away from this, it's the intentional approach to this. We never want to just be throwing content out there for the sake of it. And that's actually a lot harder. It's a lot harder on you to sit there and think, oh my gosh, what am I putting out today? The pillars are your guide and the calendar is your roadmap to make sure that at any given moment, you know exactly what type of content you have to push out. Are there any questions about just the content calendar and what that can do for you?
I just echo what she just said about how hard it is to be intentional. So I am on a schedule to produce one blog article a month. That's all I do primarily. Occasionally, I remember to post on social media channels that I've produced another blog article. So yeah, I'm not the best at any of this, but Beth can verify that this month I could not think of something to write. So I was trying really hard to get out of doing that one blog post. But she reminded me how important it was to also be consistent. And so with her help, I came up with a topic, but it was hard to come up with something that felt thoughtful and meaningful and useful to the audience. So it's harder to do even one thing sometimes than it is to do a lot of little things.
Yeah, and you just made me think of something as well, Deanie, that, and I know this is a small graphic to see, but the content calendar, it'll also make life easier if you break it down into, okay, I have this one piece of content. What does that look like on LinkedIn versus Facebook versus Instagram? There are, and we're going to get to the content scheduler here in a second, where maybe Facebook and Instagram, you kind of get a sense from the research you've done in your strategy development that your audience on Facebook and Instagram is pretty much the same. Some of that content, maybe with a few tweaks, can flow through, but LinkedIn certainly is very different. You know, the tone and the way that you approach your content, we can tell the same story, but it's just how we go about doing that is going to look a little bit different. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I think there might have been a question about how do you think about LinkedIn versus some of the more kind of community building based consumer type platforms. But I do want to get to these tools as well. And this is going to help you deploy content across those different platforms. A good quality content scheduler is incredibly important. I do my best to get content built out and scheduled a month in advance. And we use and I have some examples of tools. The content scheduler I use, it allows you to tweak the content per channel. So, you know, you'll load up a post and it'll say, okay, how do you want it to appear and be written for Facebook, for Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, whatever it may be. So you're not having to create 4, 5, 6 different posts. You're putting it in one time, and maybe you're tweaking the language on LinkedIn so it's a bit more professional, or changing the link because Instagram doesn't allow you to put a link in the post, things like that. So this can really allow you to just, you know, do so much more in so much less time. Graphic design and editor apps. If you are a very small nonprofit, you maybe, and I can probably get to that. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna back up for 1 second because I forgot about this slide. I wanted to show you a social scheduler that we use called Loomly. These colors on the side, I think you can see my mouse, those also correspond to content pillars. So again, at a glance, I can ensure that the content's intentional and that we're hitting what we need to hit. Most content schedulers will allow you a list view as well as a calendar view. I love the calendar view because again, I can see those pillars and say, okay, my content calendar looked this way. It's still looking this way when I'm going and scheduling. I'm making sure I have my bases covered. So that's just a quick little note. But graphic design and stock image apps can really be your best friend when you're trying to create visual and, you know, visually engaging content. So these are just some examples. Canva is great if you are a team of one, or if you are a beginner and just really trying to, you know, create some really pretty graphics that are on brand. For kind of the next level up, if you're looking to make some more custom graphics, Pixelmator is a great option. And I'm sure, you know, Adobe Photoshop for all of those. If you have a graphic designer, if you're lucky enough to have a graphic designer on staff. And then there's some, you know, royalty image, free stock image as well. These are free tools. So again, Trello, and again, Canva, Hootsuite, BuzzSumo, and then Pexels for royalty-free images. If you are, you know, trying to do a lot with a small budget, these tools, especially Trello, Canva, and Hootsuite, I'd highly recommend checking them out. They all have paid versions, but they have free versions that you can try out. And it's really just gonna elevate the look and the kind of the perception of your content and your profiles. And just to give you a sense of the tools that we use at Headline, the ones that I mentioned, Loomly is a scheduler app. We use Sife, which is a metrics-driven platform. And then we have, you know, Photo License. So, but before we move on, because that's really the tools and the tricks there, what questions do you guys have? Because I know I just kind of threw a lot of little things at you. Are you using schedulers? Do you have one that you like, maybe for the group to know additional options? And Danny, were there any questions related to those types of logistics in the small groups?
Not about the logistics specifically, but I use PictoChart before I got my graphic designer to help. For whatever reason, I found that easier to figure out than Canva. Okay. So that's another one of those similar situations. But no, when I was visiting the group, they didn't say anything specific about this stuff.
Okay. All right, so the team, this is really important. I think a lot of times organizations overlook who they are handing off their social media channels to. Now, if you're a team of one, that's a different story. But if you have a staff and you're looking to say, okay, who should I be bringing in to help, I beg you to not just hand over your social channels to the youngest person because, in theory, they know how to use Instagram. There are really four main aspects of a social team that make that team effective. The first one is your social team needs to have writing and communication skills. I'm going to put this at the top of the list. I know I'm biased because I am a content person, but pretty graphics, they are not going to mean very much if you are not effectively spreading your message and creating that consistent voice and style for your brand. If you are a team of one and this is an area where you're still maybe coming up with your marketing strategy and you're not quite sure, this is an area where I would highly suggest focusing. Making sure your content sounds like your organization is so critical because that is how you connect to your community. It's that voice. They should be reading your posts and they should feel like they're having a conversation with you and with your organization. That's where those connections are first made. So the second, certainly experience with social media platforms. If you don't have experience with social media platforms, you jump in and you start swimming. That's how all of us, learn. And I think platforms can be intimidating, but I will say they're changing all the time. It is not unheard of where I log into Instagram and suddenly the interface looks different and I have to go in and kind of say, okay, where did that feature go, and kind of figure it out. As soon as you learn and as soon as you become the expert, they're going to change it and you're going to have to kind of go back. So don't be intimidated by the platforms. If you are that team of one, just start posting and just get comfortable with it. And I promise it will get easier as you go. The third aspect of your team, they need to be enthusiastic. They don't need to be enthusiastic about logging into a platform and posting, but they do need to be enthusiastic about your mission and really dedicated to engaging that community. It's very easy to see through an account that is not trying to engage very, very well. And the final thing is just a knack for storytelling. At the end of the day, social media is telling your story. That's what it's there for. And so your team has to be able to tell that story in a very compelling way. So this is the last piece I want to touch on, and then I really want to dive into your questions because I know.
Can I ask a quick question before you dive into this though? Because you are the professional, and I asked in the chat how many people have a team, and no one answered that they had a team, and one person said they were a team of one. So I'm guessing that there isn't a lot of team here. So what are your thoughts on contracting to someone like you? Is it worth the return on investment? What's roughly the cost associated doing something like that? And if you have any advice on, trying to manage it in-house when they are trying to do all the things versus sharing that responsibility externally.
Yeah, I would say that the way to approach a contractor is just determining where your gaps are. So if you're that person who's really enthusiastic about your mission and you know it inside and out, but you don't have the experience with the platforms, you want to find, you probably could find even a freelancer if it's just about pushing buttons and keep your costs down. But if you need a team or a contractor to come in and really be that behind the scenes voice of your organization and take the entire piece off your plate, yeah, a contractor or an agency is going to be able to step in and do that. I think, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of someone, whether it's a team or an individual, to be able to communicate the voice, the tone, and the style of your brand. That if that breaks down, nothing else matters. So, whether it's a contractor, an internal hire, a freelancer, you need to be able to have somebody you can trust to spread that message effectively. costs are so hard. Some agencies will do a retainer, some are hourly. Freelancers are going to be far less expensive, but I would not recommend a freelancer again, unless your gap is just from a technical standpoint. I would not trust my brand. Nothing against freelancers. I was a freelancer for years and years and years. But I think you need to bring on somebody who has a sophisticated understanding, not just of the platforms, but of how a brand communicates across those platforms. So just make sure that, talk to lots of people, first of all, but make sure that the people you're talking to understand that this is not just about getting my posts up on Facebook. It's about communicating that brand message and bringing it full circle to whatever that bigger goal is. I don't know if that answers the question, but.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions about Teams before we move on? No. Okay. So I just really wanted to make sure with you all that we talked about fundraising in particular, whether you're fundraising all year long, or maybe you have certain events or campaigns throughout the year. Social media is something, as you can imagine, needs to be incorporated into any fundraising activity you're doing. There's just such an opportunity for you to just really magnify your impact and your donor dollars. So these are just a few tips. There are certainly others, and I'm happy to discuss these as well. So ways that social media can multiply your fundraising efforts, creating a fundraising landing page on your website. This type of a page would live on your site, and it would be a way for you to collect donor dollars directly through your site. The way that social media connects with this is that a call to action link would be, or call to action would be a link that would drive people back to your site to donate. And that can happen on any platform. Let's see here. Okay. Alternatively, or really, I like to do these both. So you have your fundraiser or your donor link sitting on your website, but you can actually create a fundraiser right within the Instagram and Facebook platforms. This is important because it's fewer clicks. A lot of people want to stay on the platform. They can continue to engage with you, but have a way to actually pay you money directly through the platform. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So linking your fundraiser in your profile bios. Each platform is a little bit different as to where you put that link. But the idea is that social media can be a way to get your community either off of the platform to your website through that link, or directly staying on the platform and donating through Facebook and Instagram in particular. Use donate buttons when you are posting either a static post, a reel, if it's Facebook and Instagram, as well as a story, if it's those platforms. There are ways, and I'm happy to show this to anyone kind of offline if that was if it would be helpful. But whenever you post on Facebook and Instagram in particular, there's an option before you hit post to add a fundraiser to your post. And it's particularly effective with reels and stories. This is where you'd want to have your Facebook and Instagram fundraising program set up within the platform. And then by your users will be able to go on, see that you are raising money for a particular organization, yours, and be able to click through and donate directly through the platform. You can also encourage, again, if it's a P2P campaign or if it's employees and different advocates of yours, they can add that same fundraiser to their posts. So having a fundraiser that's embedded directly into those two social platforms is really going to expand your ability to put that donation call to action directly into content and make it more shareable, as we were talking about earlier. So get employees, volunteers, and stakeholders involved. Can't stress this enough. These are the low-hanging fruit of your P2P campaign, and educate them, not just invite them to like your page or share a post. But I worked with a client too on kind of an internal marketing communication plan where you're really maybe giving your volunteers a physical sheet or sending an email saying, here's how you, here are the accounts that you can help us by following. Here are ways to help not only donate, but share the donation page on the Instagram account with your followers, giving them ideas. So not just saying, hey, can you help us spread the word, but being, again, intentional about what you're asking them to do and how you're asking them to share content through their social channels so that their community is now tapped into what it is that you're doing. Along those same lines, collaborations are incredibly important with social. So whether it's an industry partner, a creator, and by that I mean an influencer within your space and others within your industry, it is so simple to put up a social post, you tag a collaborator, and now that same content is showing up on their profile as well as yours. So it's the button pushing is pretty simple once you identify who those creators and partners are. And if you remember from before, I was saying how TikTok can be a really great research tool to help you kind of understand the space that you fit into within your online community. TikTok's great for researching creators and finding the right individuals that can help you spread your message to their audience as well. And Instagram has search tool features as well, which is really helpful. And I know this one can be a little intimidating and scary, but I promise it's worth it, just experimenting with live fundraising videos. So, you know, the more that I'm reading about kind of where the nonprofit world is evolving now, post-pandemic, hopefully, is that events are starting to come back. I don't know if anyone's seeing that or not, but if you are hosting an event or attending an event, that is the perfect opportunity to create some live content from that event and engage those who are not in attendance, and those videos live on profiles after the event, so it can re-engage people who were there. Live fundraising videos or live videos in general, they have options to also share that donate button. So if someone is either at the event or kind of on the sidelines, they can donate directly to the event. The Extra Give is a great example of this. If anyone is local to the Lancaster area and involved with kind of this day of giving, you know, doing videos and adding that donation button is a great way to get people to participate in what is a live online fundraising day. And then finally, Facebook fundraising tools. I encourage you all to you have to sign up for these tools, but by signing up for Facebook fundraising tools, that's how you're able to collect donations directly through the platform. And you know, things like Facebook will have to certify that you are in fact a registered nonprofit. It'll go through a couple of qualifying kind of data points. If any of you have a nonprofit designation to your Facebook page, you likely already have the ability to do this. It's just a matter of the formality of going ahead and getting registered. So this is important if you decide it makes sense with your strategy to be able to take donations directly through the platform, which again, I highly encourage you, even if you don't end up moving in that direction, you always have the ability to, you know, add that donate button to your organization's pages. So then with that said, I'd love to take the rest of the time to answer any questions because, you know, there's so much that, again, I could have gone over. I want to make sure you guys leave here feeling comfortable that you can take a next step and, you know, deploy one of these tools or, you know, kind of revisit your big goals and, you know, be able to get out there confidently and post to your platforms in a meaningful way. So yeah, with that said, what questions can I answer?
Beth, do you want me to read off the ones that I collected during our time?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so first one, can you say more about LinkedIn? So this person said that there's some major funders in their area that ask about them being on LinkedIn. So can you speak to whether it's of value to be on LinkedIn as well as Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the answer to that question goes back to really understanding where your community is. So, and community does not just mean those you serve, it's the donors as well. So yeah, if your donor base is on LinkedIn, then you absolutely need to be there as well. I would do some specific research about your donors and what type of content maybe they're already engaging with. If you have a list of donors, go on and see what type of content they're engaging with, look them up, get a better understanding of who they are and kind of what they're involved with. So if you have names, I mean, that's where I would start to really understand kind of how they're interacting with the platform. But yeah, LinkedIn's incredibly useful. Don't overlook it. I think, when we're talking kind of the more to the consumer, I'll call it, kind of side of things, Facebook and Instagram are the natural. But yeah, I mean, from a donor perspective, it's LinkedIn should be an aspect that you're considering.
Thanks. Can you say some things about algorithms and what happens when the algorithms change and how you manage algorithms?
Oh, yeah, the algorithm. So I'll first say don't chase the algorithm, because even, when Facebook makes their announcement about an algorithm change, they're not giving any details. If any social media manager strategist comes at you and says, I can help you get around the algorithm, please run away. Because no one knows. With that said, there definitely are some best practices. This would be such a great individual webinar just to do. But things like Instagram and Facebook, and I believe LinkedIn, I'm sure, are cognizant of spamming. So, you don't want to post 4 times a day. That's far too many. 2 to 3 times a week is a great cadence when you're getting started. Less is more in the aspect of certainly quality over quantity. The algorithms, especially on Instagram, which is more so Instagram than TikTok because it's so visually driven, the algorithm is going to prefer content that is high quality video. And I don't mean production, I mean a crisp, clear image from what you've shot on your phone. It's going to want to see trending audio being used and looking for content that's fun and engaging in those ways. If you have a grainy image or a grainy video, especially, I would say don't use that video. It'd be better to not post that and wait till you have something of higher quality to post. Video, reels and stories from Instagram and Facebook perspective, that is how you're growing your account. The rule of thumb is look at whatever the platform has pushed out most recently, whichever tool. Instagram and Facebook right now, that's reels. They want people's attention on their most announced products, we'll call them. So if all you're doing, I don't mean all you're doing, all of this takes a lot of time, but I'd much rather you put out 1 reel a week with maybe a static post than put 2 to 3 static posts out if the goal is to grow your account. You're not going to grow an account, especially a Facebook or Instagram account, by simply putting out the square image with your text and some hashtags. It's just not going to happen. So, how can you tell the same story, but turn it into a reel, put it up on stories, and then also, add it as a post. Certainly that's fine. But don't rely on just a static post on any of these platforms to grow an account. If you have an existing audience and they're very engaged, then those posts are important and they will work for you. They're just not going to grow your account. They're not going to expand your audience beyond what it already is, if that makes sense.
Can you post the same exact post across multiple channels, or do you need to adjust it?
So you absolutely can, and there's no reason you need to adjust it from an algorithm standpoint. And I shouldn't say that 100% of the time, but as far as the best practice is concerned, it's not so, the challenge is not posting the same content to platform. It's about making sure that the content, even if it's pretty much the same post, is tweaked for the audience that's receiving it on that platform. So again, the easiest example is you have 1 story to tell. You need to tweak the text between Instagram and LinkedIn. LinkedIn's just a more professional audience, whereas you can have a little bit more fun on Instagram, and that's actually a better thing. It's more engaging, which is what you want to do. So yeah, I'm all about, how can we create one really incredible piece of content, and then how much use can we get out of it? So how can we get it on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and even going beyond social, blogs and email. I would say core quality content, and then figure out how many different uses you can get out of it would be the best way to go.
Any advice on specifically how to display your posts to make them reader friendly? So not too much content, but the right amount of information.
As far as like the captions would go?
No, I forget who asked that question.
Because there are certainly best practices with, in fact, does that, whoever asked that question, do you want to clarify? If not, I can just kind of jump in. So captions, what I like about Loomly, which is the scheduler that we use, Loomly gives you a lot of really cool tips whenever you're creating a post. It will say, this time is a great time to post. If you change the time to 2 hours later, it may say, this is a really competitive time to post. Consider posting later or earlier during the day. So those can be really informative. One of the little tips it will give you is whether your post copy is getting a little bit long or not. You'll notice for Facebook, shorter copy is more engaging. People just for whatever reason aren't as willing to read as far down on Facebook. Whereas on Instagram, some of the best posts that I put out when they have bullet points, or when I use a little star emoji, and those are my bullet points, and it's visual, and people are typically more willing to read an Instagram post than a Facebook post. TikTok very much limits your character count, so you have to be real tight and concise when you're posting on TikTok, and you have to leave room for hashtags on TikTok as well. So it is platform kind of specific. One thing I am absolutely loving right now that's really engaging is using captions. So if you have an opportunity, maybe it's to explain an aspect of your mission that you want people to know a little bit more about. People are going to read text on screen much more likely than scrolling through text copy. So literally speaking into your phone and explaining one of your message points, maybe connected to one of your priority content pillars. And then there's a function on Instagram and Facebook Reels to transcribe that content, that voiceover, into captions that appear right on the screen. That's a really easy way to create engagement and keep people on screen longer. One thing I'll add to that from kind of this, but also the algorithm side, Instagram and Facebook's goal is buying your attention. The longer you can keep someone looking at your post, the more engagement that post is going to get, and the more likely those platforms are going to share that content with others. So you want to create content that keeps people looking and viewing for as long as possible. Captions do that because people will, if they're interested, watch more and more of that video to read what's on the screen. So that's a really good tool to use to boost your overall account's engagement and get more eyes on your profile.
Awesome. Thank you. Is it better to post more frequently? So is it better to have volume, or is it better to be more targeted in your posts, even if it is less frequent?
So yeah, like again, I'm a quality over quantity person all the time. I mean, don't ever post for the sake of posting, be intentional. But I still think having that guide, I start with 2 to 3. I think when you get to just 1 a week, people can kind of feel disengaged. 2 to 3 a week seems to be a good baseline to start. And that doesn't have to just be a post. That could be, one piece of content, and you're turning it into a reel, sharing that reel to your Instagram story, Facebook story, and then creating a still graphic on Canva and taking the same type of text that you captioned for your reel, plugging that into a post. Now you have 3 pieces of content from one story, and they're all going to live on that platform. The stories will live for 24 hours, but your reels are going to live on and on. And so, that could be just an easy way. Once a week, you turn one piece of content into 3 actions on Instagram and Facebook, and then, tweak it for LinkedIn as well. That's a great place to start.
Great, thanks. Hashtags. What does that look like now, and how do you best utilize them?
Yeah, it's a great question. So hashtags and well beyond hashtags, every word that's in your profile bio, especially on Instagram and TikTok, think about hashtags and general keywords similar to the way you would on your website. You have to have like your primary keywords, certain areas of your web pages, and make sure that you're optimizing your site so people find you. It's the same on social now. Within the last year, Instagram in particular has put more emphasis on discoverability through keywords. Hashtags are a very easy place. So, if you are I don't know, let's say an animal rescue, you would want to have, what is it? What is that? There's a hashtag too out for that. It's like adopt, don't shop, or something along those lines. Those key hashtags that people are searching, and just the keywords that describe the type of organization that you are and the type of mission that you're out there to promote. Your bio is another area where Instagram's looking and saying, okay, what's in the bio, those are all, that's keywords should be in there as well, and keywords within your text. So identify, again, there's no rule because it's just no one really knows what the algorithm is, but my gut is saying, 3 to 5 keywords that really describe your organization that you think people, if they were to type those in, you'd want them to find you. That's how you kind of reverse determining what those keywords are. They go in your bio, they go in hashtags, they go in the post copy of whether it's a post or a reel or a story. So hashtags, to answer the question, hashtags are one of many tools that can be used to get your keywords into the right places so that your content is more discoverable.
Awesome. Any advice on how to handle trolls? Their organization deletes those comments. Is there any strategic reason to do otherwise?
Oh, that is such a good question. So if you have bots coming at you, that's one thing. And you may need to go to like an Instagram support if it gets to that extent, or to Facebook support. However, if it is someone who is just asking a question or being negative, it's an opportunity to show other followers how you're handling those situations. Like I had a follower, wasn't even a customer, who just was putting a comment out there saying, I thought this was a great concept for a business until I saw the price. And I said, okay, that's an opportunity where I was able to express in the follow-up comment exactly why the price was what it was and why. So now, people are seeing that account that I'm managing is answering questions. And, there was a very clear explanation of what was going on. I wouldn't delete that. On Instagram, you can't just delete a comment, but always engage. Don't just leave those negative comments hanging out there. Make sure that you're offering a very fair and thorough response. Now, if someone is continuously bashing you and your account, you can block them. I absolutely would. And if it continues to become an issue, there's been instances where one person has created multiple accounts, so they're coming at you through different accounts. You need to absolutely go to like an Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn support and figure out how to mitigate that with them.
There were 2 other questions that I think we answered during the session itself, but I'll just rattle them off in case the commenter wants more follow-up. So ideas on how to get started in the first place. And then, spending too much time on creating that post versus just getting the post out there in the world. And then tied to that is how to build the schedule, which I think we pretty much have already covered, but in case there were any follow-up questions about either of those things.
So, I mean, think the first question was just getting started. Even like kind of like a website domain, make sure you claim your profile names, even if you're not going to start posting to Facebook in 6 months. Still go on there, create the account, get your organization's name so it's there when you're ready for it. Especially on Instagram, there's so much competition for names for handles that's really important to have. But start small, kind of what I was saying earlier about just taking one story, one anything announcement, whatever it may be, and just putting it out there. I would really encourage everyone not to be intimidated by these platforms, but look at them as an opportunity to grow your organization and your donor base. Do not let perfect get in the way of good. It's more important to be out there and learning as you go and making mistakes and figuring it out than it is to have that analysis paralysis and just not be involved in the conversation. So yeah, I know that doesn't make the challenge of getting started any easier, but really there's only one way to do it, and it's just to kind of jump in.
Thanks. Any final questions from the group before we wrap up today? Okay. It did come up a couple times, so I just want to reiterate that we are recording this. We'll send a follow-up email out with our contact information. Danny Beam from Beam Consulting, Beth Michael John from Headline Consultants, so you know how to find us. If you do have other follow-up questions, and you'll have a link to the recording in case you want to share it with your team or revisit it as you start mapping out your next steps.
Thank you everyone so much. I hope this is helpful. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, you guys.
All right, we are done.
Thank you.